Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to follow up on the conversation you had with the gentleman from Philadelphia, we've heard in the past complaints from election directors across the state, including in my own county, about how the executive and judicial branches have made these last-minute changes that were then crammed down onto the counties, and it caused a lot of chaos. I think that's one of the things we don't want to see happen. Wholesale major changes, we're about 8 months out from a general election. You spoke to some potential fixes. I think one of them had to do with that 2018 directive to not connect devices to the internet. You also spoke about air gapping. Do you see any short-term fixes that we can put in place ahead of this November that is not going to create wholesale consternation of our county election directors, but could improve the security and integrity of our election process here in Pennsylvania?
There are a couple that come straight to mind. The first would be the resilience that I talked about. You know, it was a real problem that in Northampton, when there was a problem, there were 20 ballots as a backup. And that doesn't buy you much time to come up with another solution. And that's really what those emergency paper ballots are for, is to buy you time to decide what you want to do. My understanding is that the Secretary in the last month has put out a directive, I think it was sort of restating a prior directive, that counties need to have 20% of their registered voters in paper ballots. I think that's appropriate. I've heard that Northampton is considering doing 30%, although they may not put them at the polling place, which I think is a mistake. I think they should be there and readily available. So that's one measure, is thinking about resilience, and I think that's good in any case. The second would be chain of custody. All counties are doing chain of custody. All of them are trying their best to keep all the ballots secure all the time. But it's not necessarily uniform. It can't be completely uniform because they're using different systems, but there can be some uniformity there, and there can be some set rules to follow and some accountability and some transparency for that. And I think that would be a good measure. And then the third one that we saw in Northampton was that on these ballots that have both barcodes at the top and text at the bottom, which one is the correct vote if they disagree? In Northampton, they disagreed. So how do you know which one? That's not something we had to contemplate before. It's not in the election code. So I think that something that sort of gives some guidance and some direction on how to address that case, I think would be welcome. And I think that was something that the two chairs of the Republican and Democratic Party in Northampton asked for as well.
That's really helpful. A question with regard to ballot marking devices versus precinct scanners. As I understand it from your testimony here today, there are significant concerns with the ballot marking devices. But then there's the precinct scanners. They don't produce ballots. They just scan them to count the votes digitally. Are there security risks with those scanners as well?
Yes. Those scanners can be hacked just as the ballot marking devices can be hacked. The difference is if you recount or if you do a high quality random audit of the paper ballots, you will detect the hack. And not only detect it, because it wouldn't be much fun to detect that your election is hacked and not be able to correct it, you can correct it by doing a hand recount of the paper ballots.
As long as the paper ballot is designed appropriately.
As long as the paper ballot has been hand marked, and it would be also helpful to employ ballot designs that don't inadvertently mislead the voter into undervoting on some contests. But the main point is, although the ballot marking devices can be hacked or misconfigured, and the optical scanners equally can be hacked, if the ballot has been marked by the voter, if careful chain of custody has been achieved, then a recount and an audit can detect the problem, and a recount can correct the problem and get you your legitimate election result, even in the presence of that hack, which is not possible with a ballot marking device in all cases.
And when you speak to an audit, you're talking about a risk-limiting audit on the back end is what's going to detect that?
Yes.
And we currently have a pilot program. Is that something that you would recommend permanently codifying?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just would like to add here that, again, we tend to focus on one specific aspect of elections, but there's such a wide myriad of things that change electoral outcome and that you have to be aware of. The ability of people to register. Kevin mentioned rain. If you have power outage at a polling place and that particular polling place is particularly heavy in one party or the other, it's just a myriad of things that make elections right or wrong. And I don't want to get lost in the fact that today we're here, our letter was to talk about the value of ballot collection using BMDs. And I think the information that we gave you is the best science that's available on that, and for you then to move forward and make the best decisions you can for Pennsylvania.
Very much appreciate that. And you are absolutely correct. A few elections ago, we had an inadvertent PennDOT issue. They had cut off the road to get to the polling place. Talk about resilience. I will say that the secretary was very helpful in that regard, and we were able to move those construction equipment pieces away to allow free and unfettered access to the polling place. So you are absolutely correct. Thank you so much.
I'll just add one thing briefly, which is we are already doing some audits in Pennsylvania. That happens routinely, and it's in the election code. What we're asking for are improved audits. That's what this risk limiting audits, if the public doesn't know, what we're talking about is improving what we're already doing.